Will scientific method and peer review get us to truth? Part 2. Scientific method and peer review. Some have acknowledged the weakness of the human mind, but they say scientific method and peer review solve this problem of truth. Let's talk about scientific method. God gave scientific method, and it works pretty well in the present to find out what works in the present. However, any knowledge that comes from it is a gift from God. Scientific method becomes less reliable as we try to apply it to things that might have happened in the past, or in predicting what might happen in the future. The further we go from the present and what is testable, the more assumptions we have to make, and the less reliable scientific method is. Every assumption makes the science less reliable. At a certain point, we are just making up stories and calling the stories science. What's missing is truth. Some people say that scientific method and peer review overcome the problem of the missing truth. The reasons they give for believing science can overcome the weaknesses of human reasoning are filled with a lot of irrational thinking that doesn't make sense in the real world. They are working within a view of the world that seems real when it isn't real. This worldview clouds their ability to see their errors in thinking. They think their rationalizing is sound reasoning, but it isn't based on truth. They believe human reason is the highest authority. They believe truth comes from observation plus reason. Reason is defined as their rationalizing thinking. They exclude anything supernatural as a starting point for their thinking. This is where their thinking fails. They just make up a starting point that excludes anything supernatural. So they are biased from that starting point. They have no explanation for much of reality. They have no explanation of where truth comes from. They believe peer review and many minds looking at a problem will eliminate bias or somehow create truth. However, peer review has turned into a political game with ungodly people making the rules. Peer review is now groupthink and confirmation bias on a group level, which creates an even stronger illusion. Those who understand science know science isn't about truth. Science is about describing what happens and finding what works. Science can predict the future and reconstruct the past, but only within limits. Consider weather forecasts. Consider climate predictions. In the 1970s, many scientists warned of global cooling with famine, starvation, and a new ice age. Decades later, the dominant narrative became global warming, with some scientists predicting the end of the world as we know it. Politicians, like Al Gore, amplified that to pinpoint dates and deadlines that we have since passed without any such terrible consequences. The further from the present scientists try to go, the more assumptions they must rely on. And the more assumptions they rely on, the less trustworthy the results. Those who don't understand science assume human reason and science can discover all truth if we just think hard enough. But that claim already depends on something science itself cannot provide. Science can tell us what works. It can tell us what happens. It can measure and predict. But it can never tell us why anything is true. Every scientific theory is provisional, and one new observation can overturn it. Yet science itself depends on something that can't be revised: truth, logic, identity, and causation. Scientists must assume truth exists before they can test anything. They do not create truth, they only investigate within it. When people turn science into an authority, they misunderstand it. They mistake a tool for the source. Through scientific method, we can discover what reality does. Through scientific method, we cannot discover why reality exists, why it is ordered, or why it is intelligible at all. Truth is not discovered by experiments. It is what makes experiments possible. Science works because creation is orderly. Creation is orderly because it reflects the mind of God, and God is orderly. Creation is orderly and reflects the mind of God because Christ is enforcing what we call the laws of nature. Another problem arises from the way modern science is funded. Research is expensive, and most scientists depend on grants to do their work. Those grants are awarded by governments, corporations, and institutions with their own priorities and assumptions. As a result, funding does not just support research, it shapes it. The way a grant is worded often determines what questions are allowed to be asked, what outcomes are considered valuable, and what results are publishable. This creates a subtle pressure. Researchers are rewarded for producing results that fit within approved frameworks and penalized for challenging them. That does not mean scientists are dishonest. It means science is done inside human systems of money, power, and career survival. And those systems inevitably influence what gets studied, what gets published, and what gets ignored. When funding determines which questions can be asked, it quietly becomes a gatekeeper of knowledge. Most scientists survive by getting grants, publishing in top journals, being cited, and keeping their department or lab funded. Grant panels, journal editors, peer reviewers, and institutions operate within accepted frameworks, what Thomas Kuhn called a paradigm. If your conclusions seriously threaten that framework, bad things tend to happen. Your paper is rejected as methodologically flawed. Your grant isn't renewed. You stop getting invited to conferences. Your work is labeled controversial or unserious. Your career quietly stalls. This is not because your data is necessarily wrong, but because it's dangerous to the existing narrative. You may have evidence for something that is outside the accepted paradigm, but you won't get very far trying to present it. The interpretation of that evidence is constrained to the paradigm. In many cases, if there's no money to be made, there's no funding. This is a big problem in medical science. Then there are the scientists themselves. Scientists have worldviews that limit their objectivity. Scientists sometimes falsify data and hide data that shows what they know they are supposed to prove is actually false. Scientists are influenced by funding. Scientists are influenced by career pressure. Scientists are influenced by peer expectations. Different scientists can interpret the same data differently. So the weakness of human reasoning still flows into science. Ungodly thinkers want knowledge without revelation, truth without God, morality without authority, meaning without accountability. Science becomes a substitute for God, not intentionally for everyone, but functionally. Much of science has turned into groupthink and confirmation bias. The system is corrupted by money, political power, coercion, dishonesty, dogmatism, and censorship. Ungodly thinkers have used this fake science mixed with political pressure, censorship, and monetary pressure to push crazy ideas like billions of years, abiogenesis, evolutionism, sexual perversion, communism, medical tyranny, climate alarmism, energy overregulation, and fake social justice. So science and peer review cannot and do not solve the problem of truth. Science and logic cannot stop the insanity in a crazy world because they have no way to generate truth. You need Jesus Christ. When you hear his voice, do not harden your heart. Hebrews 3:15.